All right, so you sent us this YouTube video, and it's got a pretty wild title, U.S. plans to debank crypto revealed. Exclamation point. I mean, are we diving into like full-on conspiracy theories today or what?
Yeah, that's quite the claim, isn't it? I will say, though, the video itself is basically summarizing this article by Nick Carter, and he's a pretty well-known figure in the crypto space. And his take on this whole thing is pretty interesting, to say the least.
Yeah, so we're talking about an actual conspiracy here, like the U.S. government intentionally taking down a bank. That's a pretty serious accusation.
Yeah, it's not a small claim, that's for sure. The bank in question here is Silvergate Bank. You familiar with them at all?
Vaguely. I know they were some kind of crypto bank, but I'm a little fuzzy on the details. To be honest, I'm not sure I fully understood why they were such a big deal.
Okay, well, let me try to clarify that a bit. Basically, Silvergate was like the bridge between traditional banking and the whole world of cryptocurrency. They were the bank for crypto businesses. Yeah. I mean, we're talking billions of dollars flowing through their system for pretty much every major player in the game.
So they were a big deal then. What made them so appealing to these crypto firms? What set them apart from traditional banks?
It all boils down to speed, really. See, they had this system, they called it the Silvergate Exchange Network, or SEN, and it let these crypto companies move money around 24/7. No more waiting for traditional banking hours, which, let's face it, is huge in the fast-paced world of crypto trading. So that was a real game changer.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. So they were handling billions essential to the crypto market, and then the whole FTX thing happened.
Exactly. FTX was really the beginning of the end. I mean, that implosion sent shockwaves through the entire crypto world, and Silvergate got caught right in the crossfire.
Yeah.
They took some serious losses, faced a ton of scrutiny, and eventually, they made the decision to voluntarily liquidate.
Okay, so on the surface, it kind of sounds like, well, a bank that was closely tied to a really volatile market got burned when that market crashed. So where does this intentional takedown theory even come from? What makes Nick Carter think there's something more sinister going on here?
So Carter's whole argument hinges on two things: timing and patterns.
Oh.
He points out that Silvergate's liquidation happened right alongside the collapse of a couple other crypto-friendly banks, Silicon Valley Bank and Signature Bank. And to him, that's not just a coincidence, it's a pattern. He even gave it a name: Operation Chokepoint 2.0.
Operation Chokepoint 2.0. That sounds ominous. What, is that some kind of secret government program?
Well, the name itself is a callback to something from the Obama era. Back then, Operation Chokepoint was about restricting banking access to certain industries, things like firearms and gambling.
So you're saying Carter thinks they're dusting off that old playbook, but this time their target is the crypto industry.
That's exactly what he's saying. His claim is that behind the scenes, regulators were putting immense pressure on banks, basically forcing them to distance themselves from anything even remotely crypto-related. And get this, he even alleges that there was this secret rule, a 15% cap on crypto deposits that they were imposing without any official documentation.
Hold on, a secret rule. No paper trail. That sounds incredibly shady. And wouldn't the banks be furious about that? I mean, wouldn't they speak out against that kind of thing?
You'd think so, right? It's a bold accusation for sure. And it really raises some serious questions about transparency and due process. If Carter is right, it suggests that there was a deliberate effort to stifle the crypto industry. And not through official regulations, but through this kind of back-channel pressure and intimidation tactics.
Okay, so we've got suspicious timing, we've got whispers of secret rules, and we've got this Operation Chokepoint 2.0 theory floating around. But why go through all that trouble? I mean, what would be the motive for wanting to take down these crypto-friendly banks?
Well, according to Carter, it all ties back to the Federal Reserve. He believes that this was all part of a larger scheme to pave the way for their own instant payment system. FedNow, you know the one.
So the idea is eliminate the competition, and the Federal Reserve gets to be the big dog in the instant payment world.
That's exactly his argument. It's a bold claim, to be sure. And it's definitely stirred up a lot of controversy and debate in both the crypto world and the larger financial world.
It sounds like something out of like a financial thriller or something. But we should probably acknowledge that Silvergate wasn't exactly, perfect, right? I mean, they had their own issues too.
Right. Even Carter admits that Silvergate wasn't without its faults. They definitely had some weaknesses in their anti-money laundering measures, for example, which made them a bit more vulnerable.
So it's not as simple as saying they were completely innocent victims here. There were some internal factors at play, too.
Absolutely. Things are rarely black and white in the world of finance. It's always more complicated than that. So, the question becomes, were they intentionally targeted and made an example of? Or did their own internal problems just get amplified by a really volatile market? Or was it a bit of both? It's tough to say for sure.
It's like trying to untangle a giant knot. And it doesn't help that you've got people like Senator Elizabeth Warren and that short seller Mark Cahodes, both very vocal critics of cryptocurrency, adding fuel to the fire.
Absolutely. They both played a significant role in this whole saga. Cahodes in particular, he was not subtle at all. I mean, he was publicly calling Silvergate a publicly traded crime scene and even bragged about his attempts to draw the bank down.
A publicly traded crime scene? That's harsh. What about Senator Warren? What was her take on all this?
She wasn't quite as colorful with her language, shall we say. But yeah, she sent these really scathing letters to Silvergate's CEO, accusing them of being complicit in FTX's wrongdoings. She really hammered them on their anti-money laundering protocols, said they were weak, that they failed to flag suspicious activity. She even went so far as to question whether they should be held criminally liable.
So we're talking about a bank that's already reeling from a market crash, facing intense scrutiny and accusations from some pretty powerful figures, and potentially feeling the heat from regulators behind the scenes. It's no wonder they ended up liquidating. But was it really their choice?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? To really get to the bottom of this, we need to dig into the specifics of Carter's argument. What kind of evidence is he presenting to support these claims of a coordinated takedown?
Yeah, let's get into the weeds a bit. We know that Silvergate was incredibly popular with crypto companies. In fact, Carter himself said that practically every major player in the crypto world was banking with them by the end of 2021, and they were holding over $11 billion in deposits.
That's right. Over $11 billion, which, by the way, accounted for more than 80% of the bank's total deposits.
Yeah.
So yeah, they were deeply, deeply entangled with the crypto market. And when that market started to get shaky, well, Silvergate's position became extremely precarious.
And shaky might be putting it mildly. It seems like the whole thing really started to unravel with the collapse of that Terra USD stablecoin.
Right. Oh, absolutely. That was definitely a major turning point. When Terra USD crashed, it was like this earthquake that ripped through the entire crypto market.
Yeah.
And then we saw this domino effect. Crypto lenders like Celsius and Voyager, even big trading firms like Three Arrows Capital, they all started crumbling one after another.
It was a cascade of failures. And then, of course, the big one hit, the FTX implosion.
Yep, that was pretty much the final nail in Silvergate's coffin. You had panicked customers worried about their money, so naturally they rushed to withdraw their funds. That mass exodus of deposits, it's what we call a bank run.
And to make matters worse, Silvergate had made significant investments in something that's typically considered very safe: government bonds.
Right, but here's the thing. At almost the exact same time as the FTX collapse, the Federal Reserve started raising interest rates. And what that meant was that in order to cover all these withdrawals from the bank run, Silvergate was forced to sell off those once safe government bonds at a loss.
Talk about a recipe for disaster. So by the end of 2022, they were looking at a net loss of almost $1 billion.
It was the perfect storm, a combination of all these interconnected crises that I think even the most established institutions would have struggled to weather. But Carter's argument is that this is only part of the story. He believes there were external forces at play that took a bad situation and made it infinitely worse for Silvergate.
$1 billion in the hole?
Yeah.
That's got to hurt. And wasn't this right around the same time that Senator Warren started sending those letters to Silvergate? I mean, talk about kicking them while they're down, right?
Yeah, those letters definitely didn't help matters. Warren was relentless. She was accusing them of being directly involved in FTX's shady dealings. She went after their anti-money laundering program, said it was weak that they failed to report suspicious activities. And remember, this is all happening while they're already fighting tooth and nail just to survive.
So they're drowning in losses, dealing with the fallout from the whole FTX meltdown, and now they've got a powerful senator breathing down their necks. That's rough. Didn't she also, go after their last potential lifeline, too?
She did. Carter talks about how Warren put a lot of pressure on the Federal Home Loan Bank, which was basically Silvergate's last resort for getting the funds they desperately needed. In the end, they caved to the pressure and refused to renew a crucial lending facility for Silvergate. It was a huge blow.
Wow, talk about twisting the knife. It really makes you wonder if there was some kind of coordination happening behind the scenes.
It's certainly possible.
Yeah.
But we can't forget about Mark Cahodes either. His accusations against Silvergate were even more extreme than Warren's.
Right, the publicly traded crime scene guy, he did not mince words.
Not at all. He was publicly accusing them of all kinds of illegal activities. I mean, he even went so far as to say they were in bed with terrorists and drug traffickers.
Yeah.
And the craziest part is he actually bragged about influencing Warren's actions against Silvergate.
So you've got this perfect storm, a crashing market, a bank that's deeply invested in that market, And then you throw in these accusations and pressure from some very influential figures. I mean, at that point, their decision to voluntarily liquidate almost seems like a foregone conclusion, doesn't it?
On the surface, yeah, it makes sense. But Carter argues that Silvergate wasn't actually on the verge of total collapse. Remember that they still had $100 million in reserves, even after paying those massive fines?
Oh, that's right. We haven't even talked about the fines yet. How much did they end up paying?
All in all, Silvergate shelled out a staggering $113 million in fines to 3 different regulators: the California Department of Financial Protection and Innovation, the Federal Reserve, and the SEC.
Wow, that is a hefty price to pay. What were those fines even for?
Well, the official reasons range from failing to properly monitor transactions to various compliance issues to misleading statements from Silvergate's CEO. But here's where it gets interesting. None of the fines were for actions that were actually illegal.
Wait, what? So they were hit with millions of dollars in fines for things that weren't even against the law. That doesn't seem right.
It's definitely unusual. And that's exactly Carter's point. He argues that the motive behind those fines wasn't really about punishing any actual wrongdoing. It was about sending a message.
A message to other banks.
Exactly. He believes it was a way to make an example out of Silvergate and instill fear in any other bank that might be considering working with crypto companies.
Like a don't even think about it or you'll end up just like them kind of thing.
Precisely. And Carter points to what happened after Silvergate's collapse as proof. Suddenly, other crypto-friendly banks became much more hesitant to fill the void that Silvergate left behind. They were afraid of facing the same kind of regulatory backlash.
So it worked. The chilling effect.
It seems that way. And if Carter's right, this was the ultimate goal of Operation Chokepoint 2.0 all along. If banks were too afraid to work with crypto companies, it would clear the way for the Federal Reserve's FedNow system to become the dominant force in the instant payment world.
So instead of competition and innovation in the financial market, you end up with
the centralization control concentrated in the hands of the Federal Reserve, which is precisely what Carter believes. This is all about a calculated attempt to stifle innovation and protect the traditional financial system from being disrupted.
It's a bold claim, but does he have any hard evidence to back it up? This whole secret 15% cap on crypto deposits seems like a good place to start, but that's not exactly something you can just, prove.
That's the tricky part. He cites a number of anonymous sources who say they experienced this pressure firsthand. One of them is even supposedly a former Silvergate executive who claims that if it weren't for that 15% cap, the bank would still be thriving today.
Anonymous sources can be a little iffy, though, right? It makes you wonder why they're not willing to go on the record.
Sure, I get that. It's definitely difficult to verify their claims without knowing who they are or what their motivations might be. On the other hand, it's not exactly unheard of for people to be afraid of retaliation for speaking out against powerful institutions, especially in the financial world.
True. It's a tough situation all around.
Yes.
But let's say, for argument's sake, that Carter is right. If this was a deliberate attempt to take down Silvergate and send a message to the rest of the banking industry, what does that say about the future of financial innovation?
That's the billion-dollar question, isn't it? It definitely raises concerns about the potential for a chilling effect on any industry that tries to challenge the status quo. If the government can exert this much pressure behind closed doors, what does that mean for the future of decentralized finance and cryptocurrency as a whole?
So what you're saying is this goes way beyond just one bank. This is about something much bigger.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, at its core, this is about a fundamental clash of ideologies. On the one hand, you've got these traditional centralized systems of finance that have been around for, centuries. And then on the other hand, you've got this new wave of decentralized finance with cryptocurrency as its standard bearer, pushing for change, pushing for transparency, pushing for, decentralization.
And it kind of feels like those two worlds are on a collision course.
They are. And the Silvergate case, whether you believe it was a deliberate takedown or not, it really highlights that tension perfectly. You have these established players who see crypto as this threat, a disruptor, and their first instinct is to protect what they have, to protect their way of doing things.
And at the same time, you have these crypto enthusiasts who see this as the future, as a way to break free from these systems that they see as outdated and controlling.
Exactly. They view decentralization as a way to empower the individual to create a financial system that's more transparent and equitable.
It's like this tug of war for the future of finance. But where do we go from here? If this battle is already happening in the shadows, what does that mean for the future?
Well, if I had a crystal ball, I'd tell you. But unfortunately, I don't. What I can say is this story is far from over. We're going to see more clashes like this as cryptocurrency and decentralized finance continue to gain more traction.
So do you think regulators will, adapt to this new landscape, or is that just wishful thinking?
It's really hard to say. They could adapt, become more crypto-friendly, find ways to regulate without stifling innovation,
Hmm.
or they could dig in their heels, try to maintain control, which could end up pushing these technologies further underground. It's really a toss-up at this point.
And what about the crypto industry itself? How do you see them responding to all this increased scrutiny and pressure?
That's a great question. Will they try to play by the rules of the traditional system, try to gain legitimacy and acceptance? Or will they double down on their decentralized ideals and find ways to operate completely outside the bounds of traditional finance?
Wow, this deep dive really got me thinking. It's wild that this whole thing, it's not just about one bank that most people have never even heard of. It's about so much more. It's about power. It's about control. It's about the future of how we organize ourselves as a society.
It really is. You hit the nail on the head. We're talking about some really fundamental questions here. Who gets to control the flow of information? Who gets to control the flow of money? And ultimately, who gets to control the flow of power?
Big questions and definitely no easy answers.
Yeah.
It's a lot to wrap your head around.
It is. But then again, isn't that what makes a topic truly thought-provoking? The fact
Yeah.
that it stays with you long after you finish talking about it?
You're absolutely right. It's definitely something we could spend hours unpacking. But for now, we should probably leave our listeners with something to, I don't know, to chew on.
Always a good idea.
So here's a final thought for everyone out there. If this theory about Silvergate is true, if this really was a deliberate move to stifle innovation and competition, what does that mean for other groundbreaking technologies out there? Are we headed towards a future where any idea that challenges the status quo gets crushed before it even has a chance to take root? It's something to think about. And until next time, keep asking questions and keep digging for the truth.